And I understand that now you want to take this line of thinking further by looking into cases in other parts of the world. Yeah. And what are in your mind now? Is there any examples that can demonstrate the idea of entanglements of mobility of people and the things?
Yeah, so I really wanted to develop the focus on environmental entanglements. And this was something I noticed that the Australian government has actually reverted to another island that has been an on and off again place of carrying out refugee status determination and long-term resettlement, which is Christmas Island, which is actually Australian sovereign territory. And there were a lot of, and this is a context that I've been thinking on, but that I'm going to be applying to another region, in that in Christmas Island there were deep entanglements between extractivist projects, but also forms of environmental protection around crabs. And Christmas Island has this very small red crab population, and there has been a great deal of effort and resources that have gone into the protection of these red crabs in terms of environmental protection work. And then at the same time, there have been the development of immigration detention centers, facilities for processing asylum seekers, for then managing them in the long term. So other forms of enclaves, but these two different practices of protection, and thinking about who is being protected and whose life is valuable. Is the crab's life versus the migrant's life, who is corralled. In Christmas Island, there have been the development of tunnels that go under roads in order to protect this particular red crab population. The Australian government has also helped finance university academics to work with Malaysia to develop this one particular species of wasp that they've exported to Christmas Island, which can eradicate a particular population of crazy ants that has tried to decimate the red crab population.
Wow.
So an intense amount of effort gone into the protection of the red crab. And what does that say around the protection of people and whose mobility is allowed and whose mobility is not. It's something I'm very much thinking about in that region, and then trying to apply in my next research project, which is going to be in Guatemala, of thinking again around how there's this language of environmentalism, a language of protection that has also been entangled in other forms of governance.
Yeah, can you tell us more about the Guatemala case?
Yeah, so in Guatemala...
presumably it's not about the crab, it's about something else.
No, in Guatemala you have, in a similar way in Nauru, colonial industry projects that happened in Guatemala around bananas and U.S. interventionism in Guatemala. And I'm thinking about this in terms of plantation logics too. So plantation logics around commodities, around resources, and then around people. And the United Fruit Company essentially quasi-governed Guatemala as a banana republic. And this then led to the US funding infamous coup of the Guatemalan government in 1954. This was of Arbenz, and that then led to years of US-funded authoritarian governments in the country and very bloody genocidal practices against Mayans. And now, some of you might have seen Kamala Harris's recent speech in Guatemala, basically instructing migrants not to come to the US, and people in Guatemala or people from other surrounding Central American countries trying to make their way to the US to stay there. And in a similar way to the Australian government's practice of funding Pacific Islands, the US government has put in a lot of money to funding Guatemala's border infrastructure. So you essentially see a sort of a similar pattern of banana turned border republic, as is the case in what I was examining in Nauru, from phosphate to refugees. But I'm really interested in thinking about how environmental protectionism has become a part of this. So the US government has also put in a lot of money through USAID into creating protective nature reserves around Guatemala, into trying to encourage to to also funding things like refugee status determination and resettlement in Guatemala, designed for people who are making their way usually from Honduras or El Salvador, to have to make their asylum claims in Guatemala, and then their refugee visas will be tied to Guatemala, but trying to encourage them to do things like become park rangers in the park reserves. So there's been a lot of a push for people to become involved, to have employment within the country, and to encourage a lot of development of the ecological sector in Guatemala as a way of keeping people in place and managing forests and reserves. So again, what does that say about who is being protected and what the language might obfuscate, and these intermingling of resources and plantation logics in terms of the laboring of people and who is kept, and commodities that are exported, US consumption of bananas, for example, and then who is being kept in place at the same time.
No, that's fascinating and that's depressing and fascinating at the same time. I think one irony here is about the protection, right? I mean, the protection of red crab is in a way predicated on mobility, because a special tunnel has to be made in order for the crab to move smoothly. And as you said, the special wasps must be imported from Malaysia, and in order to engineer the ecosystem to create a comfortable situation for the crab. So the protection about species, animals, and environment is about the mobility, create a condition for things to move around. We know that if animals don't move around, they die. But protection of people is almost the opposite. According to the mainstream discourse, actually, I was listening to Kamala Harris' speech this morning. I mean, the speech was made a while ago, and that is her very first overseas visit after she became vice president. So it means Guatemala and also migration control are indeed very high on the agenda of the new administration of the US government. She repeated twice, do not come, right? To tell the people. So, I mean, of course, that is presented with the language of protection. So protection people is opposite to protection of animal. I mean, protection people means don't move, stay at home. So that is, I found it is kind of ironic